any normal person would say that. But what's been interesting, and it shows you how things operate with this Democrat machine in California, just in the last few days since this meltdown, you've seen day after day people coming out in support, not people, organizations, the unions to be precise.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So this one is a wild ride. Piers Morgan brings on Steve Hilton, a Republican running for governor of California, and basically gives him an open platform to tear apart the Democratic candidates. Steve goes after Katie Porter, goes for Betty Yee, and starts laying out why he thinks he can actually flip California red. But here is the thing. The more he talks, the more he accidentally reveals just how much trouble his own side is in. From admitting he cannot even run as a Republican to watching unions rally behind the very candidate he is trying to bury, this interview says way more than he intended. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for the full breakdown on this one because it gets better as it goes. Also drop a comment and let me know where you are tuning in from today. I always love seeing how far this community reaches around the world. Alright, let us get right into it.
Steve, welcome to Uncensored. Sometimes I do an interview where I half wonder if I'm being set up, that somebody is answering in a way so deliberately ridiculous that it's part of a prank. But I don't think that was the case. Gender-neutral Olympics is Betty Yee's clarion call for LA.
It's amazing, isn't it, Piers? I think we may just have seen another California Democrat candidate torpedo their campaign for governor. I mean, extraordinary. I'll just tell you very quickly where I stand on this. In terms of the Olympics, by the way, I think that it's the IOC that sets the participation rules, and the executive of the host city or state doesn't have a say, but I'll look into that. I'm talking to Caitlyn Jenner, actually, a friend of mine, about all of these issues in relation to the Olympics. She's giving me great advice.
Who is, by the way, the most sensible voice on all of this. I mean, Caitlyn,
yes.
When Caitlyn identified as a woman in transition, I remember Caitlyn saying that she went to compete in her local golf club tournament and they said she could now go off the women's tees, and she went, well, that would be ridiculous. I'm still 6'3" or 4.
Right.
I still have the same physiology I had when I competed in the male decathlon and won gold medal. If I go off the women's tees, no woman could beat me. And she just said, look, I'll go off the men's tees. It's fine. It's no big deal. That is a pragmatic, sensible way around all these issues. But to hear somebody who wants to be the governor of California advocating for a gender-neutral Olympics, thinking that track and field in particular is where women could compete fairly against men. I mean, completely insane.
I was watching it. And it's almost like one of those reaction videos. You know, if someone was taping it in your team, it's like my jaw was literally dropping. And just short form. And as you, I mean, I think I almost said the same words that you did at the same time. What, 100 meters? Are you kidding?
I mean, literally, I mean, against Usain Bolt at his peak, for example.
I know.
I mean, a woman would literally barely be halfway down the track.
It's insane. Look, what I do know, what I can do about this as governor is go back to the origin of this insanity. And actually, it's a good example of the role that California has played, the negative role that has played across the country, because so many crazy far left things actually start in California and then spread to the rest of America and then around the world. This all goes back to a piece of legislation. It's the law in California that biological boys have to be allowed to participate in girls' sports. It was passed in 2013, 12 years ago, AB 1266. I've looked into it with my legal team. The governor can't just ignore the laws, but actually, where a piece of legislation violates the California state constitution, the governor can initiate a process of overturning it. And that's what I will do, because this law violates the California constitution in two places. Section 28, which defends and protects safety in schools, because you're seeing a lot of injuries as a result of this, and Section 31, which prevents gender discrimination. And this is obviously discrimination against girls. So I'm confident that as governor, I could actually overturn that law and bring some sanity back to this whole situation.
You know, a couple of weeks ago, it looked like Katie Porter might be a bit of a shoo-in. It now looks very different. I mean, I saw somebody on CNN, their stats guy, Harry, saying this was one of the biggest, fastest meltdowns he'd ever seen in an individual's polling to be a governor. I mean, absolute depth charge.
And this is what desperation looks like when you package it in a British accent and a Fox News smile. Because what we just watched was Steve Hilton sitting across from Piers Morgan, and the two of them are having this mutual celebration about how a Democratic woman candidate supposedly torpedoed her own campaign. And you have to understand something. When Steve Hilton says that crazy far-left things start in California and spread to the rest of America and the world, he thinks that is an insult. He genuinely believes he is landing a blow. But think about what he actually just admitted. He said California leads, California sets the direction, and everyone else follows. That is not a roast. That is a concession. He just told you that his side is perpetually reacting to what progressives in California build first. Marriage equality? California. Climate policy? California. Tech innovation? California. Workers' rights expansion? California. And the best he can do is stand on a show and go, well, all those crazy ideas started there. Yes, they did. And then the rest of the country caught up every single time. Now, here is the part that genuinely made me pause. He brings up Caitlyn Jenner and talks about how Caitlyn said she still has the same physiology from competing in the male decathlon. And he frames this as the most sensible voice on the issue. But what he is really doing is using a trans woman to argue against trans inclusion. He is weaponizing one person's individual choice and presenting it as if it should be universal policy. That is not pragmatism. That is cherry-picking one story that supports your position and ignoring the thousands of trans athletes who compete without incident at every level. And then he pivots to AB 1266 and says this law violates the California Constitution in 2 places. He sounds so confident. He has got his legal team. He has got his sections memorized. But here's what he does not tell you. That law has been on the books since 2013, 12 years. And no governor, no court, no legal challenge has successfully overturned it. So either every legal mind in California missed what Steve Hilton found, or maybe his constitutional argument is not as airtight as he wants you to believe.
Meanwhile, a recent poll by Zogby Strategy shows you 6% ahead of her now. There's been a real shift here. You know, most people think it's impossible for a Republican candidate like you to actually become governor in California. But is it? I mean, are you beginning to think that the Porter meltdown has got a bit of momentum for you that could actually prevail?
Yeah. Look, Piers, I've always said it's going to be very difficult. I'm under no illusions, but it's not impossible. And here's a couple of things. First of all, after this 15 years now of one-party rule in California, Democrats have controlled, they've had the governor's office, the state legislature, they run all the big cities. There's no one else to blame, and the results are terrible. And it's not, and people around the world, obviously, the very visible problems of California misrule are very apparent, you know, the homelessness and the crime and so on. But actually, on a daily basis, everything else is even more of a disaster. Right now, we have the highest unemployment rate in all of America and the highest poverty rate, the highest housing costs, the highest cost for gas, electricity, water, you name it, the worst business climate. Everything's a disaster. And so you're seeing a majority now, pretty consistently for the last 2 years or so, quite a sizable majority who say the state's going in the wrong direction and we need change. So there's a majority for change. The question is, are people going to support a campaign from a Republican? And that's my argument, that actually a non-ideological, positive, practical campaign, that's what I'm running on, not divisive ideological issues, but simple practical things, cutting gas prices, cutting electric bills, especially cutting housing costs so you can afford a home of your own. I think it is possible. And you look at the other Democrats running, actually, although they haven't had the kind of meltdown, maybe we've just seen one with Betty Yee, as Katie Porter has, but they're all kind of the same thing. It's the same old machine politician that's come up through the ranks. They all toe the party line. They're controlled by the unions. I don't see anyone there who can actually offer the change that we so obviously need in California. That's why I'm confident that I can do it.
I'm certain. I mean, the anger management issues with Katie Porter seem to go back a long way because her divorce papers resurfaced this week. Her ex-husband, Matthew Hoffman, alleged that she dumped a bowl of steaming hot boiled potatoes on his head, said she was prone to extreme anger, had a, quote, history of snapping and screaming at him and the children, and would claw and scratch her arms while blaming him for the markings. He said that Porter wouldn't let him have a cell phone because she said, quotes, "You're too effing dumb to operate it." And so it goes on. And then you see the clips of her screaming at the staffers for getting in her shot. You see the way she tried to deal with that journalist for asking perfectly reasonable questions that she'd asked of every candidate. And you get an impression of somebody who has a very short fuse, very arrogant, very entitled. And the consequence of all this colliding at the same time is a dramatic drop in her popularity. Do you think now, as Porter has been Betty Yee said before she probably depth charged her own campaign. Do you think it's time that Katie Porter dropped out?
And here is where it gets really interesting, because Piers Morgan says the quiet part out loud. He literally tells Steve Hilton that most people think it is impossible for a Republican to become governor of California. And instead of pushing back on that framing, Steve Hilton agrees. He says, "I am under no illusions. It is going to be very difficult." So let me get this straight. You are running for governor of the 5th largest economy on earth, and your opening pitch is that you probably cannot win? That is not humility. That is a man who knows the math does not work. And then watch what he does next. He starts listing everything that is supposedly wrong with California. Highest unemployment, highest poverty, highest housing costs, worst business climate. Everything is a disaster. Those are his words. But think about what he is not saying. He is not saying why those problems exist. He is not talking about global economic pressures. He is not mentioning that California's GDP alone would make it the 5th largest country in the world. He is not acknowledging that the state generates more federal tax revenue than almost any other. He just lists problems like a complaint card and hopes you do not ask follow-up questions. And the reason he cannot run on ideology is because he knows Republican ideology is electoral poison in California. He literally said he is running a non-ideological campaign. Think about that. A Republican candidate who cannot run as a Republican. He has to sand off every edge, avoid every culture war position his own party is built on, and hope that people vote for vibes instead of policy. That tells you everything about where the conservative movement actually stands in that state. And then Piers pivots to Katie Porter's divorce papers from years ago. And this is what opposition research looks like when you have nothing substantive left. You go dig up old family court documents and read them on air. Her ex-husband made allegations during a divorce. That is what divorces are. Two people saying the worst things about each other. Using that as political ammunition tells you far more about the people deploying it than it does about Katie Porter.
Well, any normal person would say that, but what's been interesting, and it shows you how things operate with this Democrat machine in California, just in the last few days since this meltdown, you've seen day after day people coming out in support, not people, organizations, the unions to be precise. Unions have come out and said, and I'll just tell you the kinds of things they're saying. We don't need someone who's polite. We need a fighter in California. Katie Porter's our fighter. She may not be the most polished. She may be not the most polite, but she's the, etc. Right? So the unions are rolling in behind her. So I'm not sure that she will drop out, but I don't think there's any prospect that she's going to actually get to the, we have a system in California, it's called the top two system. So you don't have a Republican and a Democrat primary. Everyone's on the same ballot and the two top candidates go forward. Right now, all the polls show me as being one of the top two. Up until now, it's been Katie Porter. I think we're looking at another Democrat coming in, and it feels as if the machine is moving behind a guy called Alex Padilla, who is the current US Senator for California. Seems to me they're trying to recruit him almost to get into the race. But my argument is it doesn't really matter who they put up. It is time for change in California. How can a Democrat come and clean up the mess that they made?
And on balance, do you think Betty Yee may have to withdraw her candidacy after what we just witnessed?
Well, again, there is a constituency for those views, I'm sad to report, here in California. But most normal people, I mean, even in California, the majority who think that biological boys should not compete in girls' sports is very large. I think across the country, it's like 85, 90%. In California, it's 65, 70%, if I'm right in remembering those numbers. So I think that, again, the activists and the real core of the Democrat machine will think that she did a good job, honestly, which is stunning, but that's how far.
You know what, Steve? I've got a new
track.
book coming out called Woke is Dead. And I actually make the point it's not actually dead yet. It will keep popping up with outrageously ridiculous things that people are going to say and do. But the public tolerance of them is rapidly diminishing. In other words, they're like weeds in a garden. When they pop up, they have to be dealt with. I've got a feeling when Betty Yee sees the reaction to what she has said about the Olympics coming to California and how she would like it to be gender neutral, particularly in the 100 meters, the ridicule that is going to fall on her head is going to be such that I suspect her position as a candidate will become untenable pretty quickly. And that's because actually the woke ideology at its core is ridiculous. And we've just seen a clear example of how ridiculous it can be. Steve Hilton, great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Now, this is the moment that made the whole segment worth watching, because Piers asks Steve Hilton directly, should Katie Porter drop out? And Steve says any normal person would say yes. But then he admits that union after union is lining up behind her. Organizations are coming out saying we do not need polite, we need a fighter. Katie Porter is our fighter. And you could hear the frustration in his voice. Because what he just described is institutional power. That is a coalition. That is organized support from labor, from working people, from the actual infrastructure of democratic politics. And he cannot compete with that. He knows it. He explains the top 2 primary system in California where everyone is on the same ballot. He says all the polls show him as one of the top 2. But then he reveals what is really keeping him up at night, Alex Padilla. He says it feels like the machine is moving behind Padilla to enter the race. And that is the tell. Because if Steve Hilton were truly confident, he would not care who the Democrats put up. But he is already gaming out scenarios where a stronger Democrat replaces Porter, and he knows that makes his already impossible path even harder. You know what this reminds me of? It is like watching someone play chess who is already 3 moves behind but keeps talking about how great their opening was. The board has shifted, the pieces have moved, and Steve Hilton is still sitting there telling you about his non-ideological practical campaign while unions are building walls around the Democratic coalition that he will never break through. And then at the very end, he plugs his book called Woke is Dead, and honestly, the irony writes itself. You are calling woke ideology dead while simultaneously admitting that you cannot win in the most progressive state in America. If it were truly dead, you would be winning. But you are not. And California keeps proving that the values he calls ridiculous are the values that the majority of people in that state keep voting for every single cycle. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.